We're coming up on the end of Hispanic American Heritage Month. It's a 30-day period officially recognized to celebrate Latino culture and history in the U.S. And from 2010 to 2020, more than half the increase in the American population was among Latinos, a group that grew by almost 12 million people in that time, now accounting for 19% of the entire population. But you wouldn't know it by looking at our government. In Congress, only 9% of the House and 6% of the senators are Hispanic or Latino. Most local governments aren't much better, and that has consequences. I was joined earlier this week by two people who know that better than anyone. Rodrigo Martinez, a Mexican-American immigrant who came to the U.S. 21 years ago with $125 in his pocket and a scholarship. He's now the Chief Marketing and Experience Officer at CIC Health. And Boston City Councilor-at-Large Julia Mejia, who first came from the Dominican Republic at age 5, was elected in 2019 as the city's first Afro-Latina in that body. Rodrigo and Councilor, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Great to be here, Jim.
Councilor, can I start with you? 92% of the growth of the population, you know this, in Boston since 1980, Latinos. The number statewide is not far behind, but the share of power and influence of the Latino population in those settings trails well beyond their share of the population. Why is that?
Well, there are a number of factors. I think that, first of all, here in the city of Boston, now there are 2 city councilors in the first time in history.
That's right.
That they're Latino. So there is some hope here, Jim. But I do believe that I think that access to opportunities, really understanding the American political system for many folks who are immigrants and then become naturalized citizens, there's lots to learn in terms of the political process. I also think that representation matters. And when you don't see people who are fighting for you, then you don't see the need to go out and vote.
Rodrigo, are we doing any better in the corporate world in terms of representation in high places, or no?
Well, I mean, I think the answer is no. We could do so much better. My world is in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, if you like, life sciences, biotech, health-related, digital health. And I think there's so much more to do. I think just as it's important for Latinas, Latinos, Hispanic, all groups in our big, what we call big Hispanic or big Latinx group, to see themselves as much in the political side as it is in the corporate and the entrepreneurial side.
You know, it seems to me that the part of the issue is the wealth gap, Councilor. And while so much attention has been paid to those infamous figures from the Federal Reserve about the average wealth of a white family in Boston is $247,000, a black family $8,000. We don't often hear 2 other statistics from that study. $3,200 for the average Puerto Rican family, $0, and I repeat, $0 for the average Dominican family. So the wealth gap plays a big role here, does it not?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I'm Dominican, so I've experienced that wealth gap right here in the city of Boston. But I think a lot of it also goes back to immigrants coming to this country and trying to acclimate. There are certain degrees that don't translate when you come here to America. So oftentimes a lot of folks who come here need to take on other jobs that may not be opportunities for them to really grow their income. And so I think that there's a lot of work to do. I'm the chair of small business and workforce development. So we've been working at helping small businesses grow here so that we can close that wealth gap.
You know, speaking of wealth gap, Rodrigo, there's also, and you know the industry quite well through CIC and your other work, there's a health gap too. And I know we're closing it in this state, but we look at the early numbers from places like Lawrence, for example, where more than 80% of the population is Latino. In March, 2% of the Latino population had been vaccinated, while 2% of the Latino population, 47% of the whites, I believe the number was. And while the Latino number is up to, I think, the low 40s, it still trails. That's another part of the equation. Is it not a huge health gap?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think, look, one of the work we did last year or the beginning of this year with the vaccination strategy was what can we do to reach many of these communities? And with the work with local organizations, nonprofits, the support of individuals like Councilor Mejia and others, is not just bringing people into the vaccination sites like we did at Roxbury, but also taking the mobile clinics to Chelsea and Lawrence, et cetera, et cetera. And that proved to be critical, to just double down on going where people are and helping them there get vaccinated.
Councilor, what changes the equation? If you could wave a wand and do one or two things that would change the representation issues, change the wealth issue, what are those things that could have a real and fairly immediate impact in your estimation?
That's a dangerous tool to give me in terms of what I think. I just feel like I would probably wave more political courage and sprinkle it across a number of different spaces and places, and to help encourage people to recognize that Latinos, we are the fastest growing population. 130,000 Latinos live in the city of Boston alone. And we need to see ourselves reflected in leadership positions, and not just political ones, but in the boardrooms and commissions, because once we have more people in these spaces, the conversation changes. And so if I had a magic wand, I would make everyone speak Spanish. No, I think that we really need more intentionality around how we're going to address these issues. And the only way we're going to get there is if we really have the courage to step to the side and create space for Latinos to really exert their power.
By the way, I just want to add that 140,000 number, roughly only 50,000 are registered to vote, which obviously has an impact too. Rodrigo, what would you do? What's the one thing that you think would help change the equation?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, nationally and probably some of it also locally, I think for a long time in the larger Latino voice, we've looked at Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to have stronger voices of scientists and teachers and people doing interesting things, of all of these incredible students in science and technology, small startups, medium companies. We have that here, right? Clearly, the Commonwealth has the richness that we need to connect with the different Latinx and Hispanic groups outside of the usual ways. And so I would do that. I would highlight leaders, Latinos in different parts of the private sector, from small startups all the way to the large companies.
Well, you, Rodrigo, we only have 2 minutes left, and I want you each to take a minute. You may have answered the question already. We're talking about challenges for the whole time we've been together. Let's focus the last minute and a half on successes that are being celebrated this month. Rodrigo, starting with you, you touched on some of them.
Yeah, I mean, look, one of the things that I emphasized in my work that I felt really, proud to have the opportunity is to reach out through all of the Spanish-speaking channels that we have in the city and the Commonwealth, everything we did around vaccinations and testing, but mostly vaccinations, right, across the year. Mm-hmm. So over 50 interviews in Univision. I just finished translating right now a document for Univision, right? Like just going out of our way to reach the population in the language. And I just feel very, very glad to have had that opportunity and to continue with that.
Councilor, what are you celebrating this month?
Yeah, I think to Rodrigo's point in terms of just the ability, our office was able to secure over 3,000 people to get vaccinated through our efforts. And we worked with small businesses, immigrant-owned businesses, and reduced the barrier to engagement around that effort. So I think that those collaborations are worth celebrating because we're seeing more people get vaccinated. And then the other piece is that, it shouldn't just be a month. I'm going to celebrate Hispanic heritage every day, all day. And I just want to encourage people to do the same. I'm going to always celebrate the Latino community. And I think that I'm encouraging your viewers to do the same.
I knew you would. Councilor Mejia, it's good to see you. And it's a pleasure to see you too, Rodrigo Martinez. Thank you both for your time.
Great to see you. Thanks, Jim.